If you have never read this book, welcome to BookTube. Everyone is talking about this series. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Cozy Corner. We got an upgrade. New tripod, new angle. I finally get to sit in a recliner instead of cross-legged on the floor. We're moving up in the world. If you've never been here before, welcome. My name is Lee, and this is my library. So grab a mug of something yummy and settle in for some talk of books. Today, we are doing the Thanksgiving book tag. I was sort of desperately scrambling for November BookTube ideas because I did not, on top of NaNoWriMo, prep very well for what I wanted to do this month for BookTube. And so I found on the massive book blogosphere that there was something called the Thanksgiving tag, where you take each element of a Thanksgiving dinner and match a book to it. I have all my prompts written down here. Now, the originators of this tag is a no longer running BookTube channel. I don't know if they're necessarily a BookTube channel, but I'll link them down below. And I will also link down below the book blog that I found this tag from. So this tag, like I said, has an element of the Thanksgiving dinner and sort of an attribute given to it for a title prompt for you to pull something off your shelves. This was harder than I anticipated it to be because if you look behind me, that is my only bookshelf that I have in my room. That is all my books. I have a bigger one that my family uses, but this one is mine. It's puny. It's not that I wouldn't love a larger bookshelf, but I have actually really appreciated having a smaller one because I am better able to curate the titles that I love. However, with prompts like this that are sometimes negative, like they're meant for you to pull your least favorite off the shelves, I don't have a lot of my least favorites anymore because I regift them or I donate them, or they don't last very long on my shelves if I don't enjoy them enough to keep them there. Thankfully, I found, thankfully Thanksgiving, I'm gonna have to stop doing that. I'm gonna trip myself up every time. Anyway, I found a book for each prompt, so I have something to hold up and show you, and I don't just have to tell you about it and then you have to go find it yourself. So anyway, I also do want to apologize for those of you who believe that Thanksgiving should get its own celebration. I wholeheartedly agree with you. However, this year, because of NaNoWriMo, I am doing everything in my power when I have spare time this month to transform my house into Christmas time so that when I get to December, I don't have to do squat. It is already prepped for Christmas. We're good to go. I don't even have to worry about buying presents. That's a lie. I'm a notoriously late Christmas gift buyer. But I've already hung my Christmas outdoor lights with help from my family. Thank you, family. And I have several books. Well, I have several books, but I have several gifts that are on the way for people. Tonight I am planning on cleaning the room where the Christmas tree goes. We're just being proactive, which is why I am wearing a Christmas sweater and I have my Christmas mug full of coffee. This is a trough of a mug. There's so much coffee in here. And to be fair, around mid-November, this is the only article of clothing that I wear when I get home. It is my all-time favorite sweatshirt. It has cats on it, and it's a Christmas sweater. What more could you want in an article of clothing? Pockets. It doesn't have pockets. We could do with some pockets. Anyway, don't worry, we still got some nods of fall. I still have Halloween decorations that I haven't taken down, and my all-time fave, we got leaves going in the background. So it's not that I don't love fall. I love fall, and I 100% love Thanksgiving, which is why we're doing this tag today. So enough of me rambling. Let's get into the book tag. My darling are going to go right there. Really hoping that I remember to grab the mug, not the candle. Fingers crossed. Okay, let's get started. So the first prompt is bread. I could do a whole video just about bread. So, bread's prompt for the Thanksgiving book tag is, what book is purely fluff and has no real plot line? As I prefaced, I have a caveat in the beginning. I don't keep books that I don't enjoy, or I don't keep books where I'm not the intended audience. Those get donated or regifted, but I do have one on my shelf that I do think is more just for pure enjoyment and shock value and laughter rather than like actually having a plot line. There is a plot line, but it's not like super moving or there isn't a moral to the story. Really? So, and it isn't actually even a book, it's a playbook. It is A Haunting We Will Go, a full-length mystery comedy by Tim Kelly. I particularly love this one because I was in this play in high school. It was the very first play I was in high school. And then several years later, when I was in a drama class, we got to pick a play to do a scene from in class, and she happened to have extra copies. And did I swipe one from my teacher? Yes, I did. Basically, this follows the story of Norma Corwin, who is this glamorous TV producer who is searching for her next big project. And then she remembers, as a little girl, that she made a vow to spend a night in this really creepy inn. I think it's called, the Inn of the Three Sisters. I had to cheat a little bit. It's been 8 years since I've done this, guys. 10 years? It's been 10 years since I did this play. 2009? Oh, 11 years. Oh, great. She remembers that she made this vow when she was little, and so she decides to go and spend a night there, and maybe it will inspire her to have this next big hit. However, once she gets there, a whole bunch of creepy things start to happen. It, of course, is a comedy, so there's so much slapstick, so much jokes. That's not proper grammar. There's a lot of odd characters that stumble across her path, other guests who are staying at the inn, and then there is a plot twist at the end that sort of reveals why it was all a farce. And it's really good, it's funny, however, it's not super moving. There really isn't like a moral to the story, except maybe judging a book by its cover, but there are so many better examples of that plot line out there. But this is really the only thing where I could say that it's mostly fluff, as most comedies are, but it's a really good play. If you don't spend a lot of time reading plays, you should really do it. It's actually really fun to be able to see lines and stage prompts and effects that are supposed to happen and sort of create them in your head. It's very technical, and I find that for whatever reason, my brain really likes imagining what I would do if I was directing this play or producing this show. I really enjoy it. So this is my bread prompt, a book that is mostly fluff, has no real plot line, A Haunting We Will Go by Tim Kelly. The number 2 prompt is turkey, the main course. And of course, because turkey has that beautiful chemical combination where you eat it and then all of a sudden it's nap time. The prompt for turkey is, what book makes you fall asleep? And I don't necessarily think it's the books that make me fall asleep. It's mostly because I'm tired and exhausted and I can't keep my eyes open. However, I really have a lot of sweet memories of my mom reading to me and my brother when we were little. She would read to us on car rides, she would read to us before bed, she would read to us when we were sick. I think those are probably my favorites. She just took the time to invest in me. My brother, not so much. She doesn't like reading as much as I do, but it really made an impact on me how much she loves reading, and I really enjoy it now, obviously. But one of the favorite books that she ever read to me is a series called The Adventures of Hazel Weston, and this is the first book, called Canyon Girl by Paula Montgomery. Even just pulling this book off the shelves, I got goosebumps and such nostalgia for remembering what these books were like when I was first hearing them. And then, I almost brought tears to my eyes, because look, this book belongs to Lee. In my pink gel pen, sparkly pink gel pen, we love it. Anyway, these were withdrawn books that I think she saved from the public library. So glad she did. And I think probably one of the reasons why I love them so much is because it's mostly about the Pacific Northwest. And this is where my dad's family is from. My grandma lived in Portland for a long time and we would go out and visit her. It's just a place that holds a lot of love in my heart, and it's just my favorite. They're quite a lot like the Dear America books, with a healthy dose of Little House on the Prairie. Like, it's that kind of vibe. This follows the story of a girl named it's so cute, I'm just reading the blurb on the back. Basically it follows this story of this girl named Hazel Big Enough Weston. That's her sort of nickname that her family calls her, Big Enough, because she's the littlest, and that's her big thing. She argues, I'm big enough to do that. Anyway, it's so cute. It follows their story on the Oregon Trail as they head out to the Pacific Northwest. If I could create my own storyline out of the video game Oregon Trail, this would be it. There's so much that happens that's just sort of stereotypical Oregon Trail story, but it's so wholesome. And I think if anybody really enjoyed Little House on the Prairie, they're really gonna like this. The print in these books is massive. Yeah. Oh, and it's losing pages. They're well loved. These would be so good to read to young children, or even reading them yourself if you're needing sort of a blast from the past in terms of like remembering things you read when you were little. And if you really love legends and lore based around the Imnaha Canyon, that's where she travels through. It's so good. This really, I think, sort of loosely filled the prompt of books that make you fall asleep, because it reminds me a lot of the books my mom would read to me when I was sick or needing to fall asleep, and it's just, I could talk about this all day. The next prompt on the list is gravy, which of course makes every element of the Thanksgiving dinner worth eating. It's so good. It's like the whipped cream on top of everything else. It's so good. Anyway, this prompt is, which first book made the entire series worth reading? I don't think I will ever get tired of talking about this book series, and that is The Tiger's Curse by Colleen Hawke. I happened upon this series at the best possible time in my life. I would really say that along with maybe Artemis Fowl, this book opened my eyes to the world of YA fantasy, which is my #1 favorite genre. I could talk about it forever and a day. This book is so good, and I have read this thing maybe 10 times. Now I'm wanting to read it again, and I can't because I'm still forging my way through my TBR. But it sits a beautiful prime place on the top shelf in the front of my bookshelf. It's so good. And I read this book, and the second one wasn't out yet, and I was devastated. And then the next 3 came out, and it was the light of my life. So basically this follows the story of 2 brothers whose names are Ren and Kishan, and they are princes in an Indian sort of dynasty. It doesn't really, that part at least is fictional, like the existence of their land and the whole construct of their government, but that's where the story comes from. Basically, Ren and Kishan's mother and father are overthrown by an evil warlord named Lokesh, who is also sort of a evil sorcerer on top of everything. Think Jafar, like that's what I'm going for in my mental imagery. Anyway, and he decides to imprison the 2 princes so that he can take over their kingdom and there isn't any heir apparent to challenge his rule of their land, and he turns them into tigers, cursed for eternity to live as tigers. And for a while the brothers live together, but they separate and go their separate ways because they themselves had their own drama over Lokesh's daughter, and they are not on speaking terms. The relationship did not end well. So centuries pass, and this girl named Kelsey, who I think is probably one of my favorite literary heroines, whichever term you want to use, she's just my favorite. Kelsey Hayes is her name, and she has sort of this, the first line of the book is, "I was standing on a precipice." She is 18, newly graduated from high school, and tragically both her parents died in a car accident, and she lives with her aunt and uncle. And so she's standing at a precipice in line at a temp office, trying to find a summer job for a way to pay for community college. And what happens to roll into town? A circus. And so Kelsey gets a temp job at the circus, sort of doing light custodial work, but she eventually becomes friends with the animal trainer. And in the show is this massive white tiger, and she's obsessed with it. Something is pulling her towards this tiger, and so she becomes friends with the animal trainer, and he allows her to deliver the tiger's meals, and she basically ends up spending all her time with this tiger. She reads him Romeo and Juliet, great poetry. It's so cute and so bookish, and I love it. Once the circus is getting ready to leave, a man shows up named Mr. Kadam, and Mr. Kadam wants to buy the white tiger, and Kelsey's kind of heartbroken because she bonded with this tiger, and basically Mr. Kadam offers her the chance to travel with them to make sure that the tiger is seen safely to his habitat in the rainforests of India. And so Kelsey goes. She basically leaves everything behind in the States and follows Mr. Kadam and Ren, who is the name of the tiger, and while she is there, she discovers that this white tiger that she had so much love for is actually Ren, the Indian prince. And this whole book and the 3 following are her and Ren's journey to break the curse. Ren does transform into a man, and each time they break part of the curse, there's 4 parts to the curse, they stay men for a certain amount of hours during the day. And of course, because no epic fantasy is complete without a love triangle, they have to go find Kishan because they need his help. And it becomes a love triangle. She falls in love with Ren first, but Kishan is also interested in her. I could say so much more about what's in this book. That all happens within the first 5 chapters. But it's so good. And there's so many heartbreaking moments that happen in here. I can't say too much because I don't want to spoil it. I think the thing that impressed me most about these books, aside from the massive love triangle, I was very invested in all of the relationships that happened in here, was Colleen Hawke's research into India's culture and religion and lore and artifacts and ruins, and all of it is infused in here, and I felt like I was learning so much alongside reading, but I didn't know I was learning until I got to the end of the book. I'm like, wow, there's a whole lot of information in there that I just took as fact, and it was so good. Oh, I have read her Reawakened series, which is almost the same premise except with Egyptian lore instead of Indian lore. I have yet to read her new one. I can't remember what it's called. But nothing I think will ever compare to Tiger's Curse. I think this is her best by far. So this book is the gravy. It made the other 4 the best things I've read in a long time. And I have yet to read her novella, which is the story of Ren and Kishan and the girl they fall in love with way at the beginning before this book happens. That's on my TBR still. So get your face near this book. It's so good. Next is stuffing, which I love stuffing. It's my favorite thing. It's just another excuse to eat bread. Am I right? I'm right. Also, I don't think I've ever had stuffing that's actually been like stuffed inside a turkey. We always usually cook ours separately in a crock pot. I don't know. Interesting. That was a thought I just had. Anyway, the prompt for this book is, what book is stuffed full of action scenes? I actually have quite a few books that I think would fit this prompt really well. However, I wanted some more darker stories to go along with the lighter reads, and so I picked up 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. The book jacket is gone. This story was so good. I was not expecting to love it this much. This was an impulse buy at Barnes & Noble years ago while I was in college. And the only reason I bought it was because I was curious to know what another Leigh had been writing about. And then I did not know the hotbed of conversation and obsession with this series would bring about. I bought it pretty early when it came out. Let me double check when it actually came out. Now I'm curious. I want to say it was pretty new. Yeah. Yep, I definitely 100% bought this on the new release table. It came out in 2015. That was around the time that I bought it. If you have never read this book, welcome to BookTube. Everyone is talking about this series. The Crooked Kingdom came out a while ago. There's rumors she's writing another one, but she also has another series that's based out of this universe. Everyone's talking about Leigh Bardugo right now. Okay. 6 of Crows is kind of a complicated story to explain. So I will give you the gist because I really don't want to spoil too much. You'll find other people talking more in depth about this book elsewhere, but this follows the story of Kaz Brecker, who is a teenage mob boss who lives in the city of Ketterdam, specifically the Barrel. Very dark, very grimy. He has a team of, I think it's 5 at the beginning of the book, but it becomes 6 later. People who work for the mob called Crows, or the Crows. I think that's right. It's been several years since I've read this. And basically they are charged with infiltrating the Ice Court, which is notorious for its hatred of the Grisha, which is the second series that Leigh Bardugo has written. But the Grisha are gifted with magical powers, and they are there to discover a scientist, I believe, who has a particular weapon that someone is paying them heavily for. And so Kaz takes his team of crows to go infiltrate the Ice Court and steal this scientist and the weapon. I think the weapon actually neutralizes Grisha or kills Grisha. I'm so sorry if this is incorrect. It's been a long time since I've read this book. And I read Crooked Kingdom like 2 or 3 years ago. It's been a while. Anyway, this story is really good and I like it. I don't read too many books where each chapter is told from a different perspective, and it's told from the different perspectives of all the members of Kaz's team. So it's Kaz, Inej, who is his sort of almost love interest. I ship them really hard. It's so cute. You have Nina, who is the Grisha on their team, Jesper, and who's the other one? Well, the other chapters have Matthias, who is a soldier from the Ice Court, who is Nina's sort of weird love interest, and then, oh, nope, hang on. Oh, got it, Wylan. Whew! That was gonna drive me nuts. Wylan is the sixth crow, who is sort of like the accident-prone kid who everyone sort of loves, Jesper in particular. No spoilers on that either. This is such a good story. Even though I don't remember too many of the details, I remember so much of the action that happens in here and how convoluted this plot was. The massive plot twist at the end. Didn't see that coming at all. And the characters that it implicates in that plot twist, I was heartbroken. And it perfectly sets up the second book. The second book, I think probably in my opinion, I don't even know if one was better. I think they're both pretty evenly tied in terms of which one I like. I haven't read any of the Grisha verse yet. I really want to. But there's a lot of action in this scene and it's very grimy and dirty, and that's mostly because of where they live, but also because they're all teenagers and they're asked to do some pretty heinous stuff. And yeah, there's lots of action here. If you really like dark fantasy, this is for you. Okay, so question number 5 in this tag is mashed potatoes. What book looked good and then wasn't? And I have several issues with this because I love mashed potatoes and it takes a lot for mashed potatoes to be bad. I love lumpy mashed potatoes. I love smooth mashed potatoes. I don't know why people don't like mashed potatoes or why they're given the prompt of what looked good and then wasn't. Justice for mashed potatoes. Anyway, I actually, like I said earlier, I don't keep books that don't interest me or where I know I'm not the audience, because I feel like if I'm holding on to them, I'm preventing someone else from enjoying and getting something out of this book. So like I said, I regift them or I donate them. However, I do have 2 on my shelves that I am keeping, but they let me down a little bit. I enjoy the story, but, or they mean a lot to me, or the subject material is something I love, but they didn't live up to the hype. And I have 2 instances of this because I feel like these are the most common instances of where this happens with books. The first is where the hype about this book or the blurb on the back set it up to be something that it wasn't. And that first one is Above the Bay of Angels, where this is a new release. I want to say 2019, but I feel like it came out this year. I've talked about this book before in other challenges. This was part of my 12 Tropes challenge. This did come out this year. Rhys Bowen is a very well-known historical fiction author. This is the first book I've ever read by her. I hope the other ones are better. Not that this was bad, but I was expecting so much more and I just kind of found it like mashed potatoes. Okay, maybe I'm understanding why this prompt is what it is, but it just was sort of bland. Things happened and it was interesting. And I love the historical setting that this is. It follows Queen Victoria and her time spent in Nice and the hotel they built for her. There's a murder mystery, there's some mistaken identity, stolen identity more like, and blackmail and love and poisoning, and there's so much that happens in here, but the first time I read it, I was expecting so much, but it was just kind of blah, if that makes sense. But I'm still gonna keep it because overall it was enjoyable. I think I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, but it just didn't keep me on the edge of my seat like I was anticipating it to. And then the second, which I think is the other instance of book letdown, is when you read it once as a kid and you really, really enjoyed it, and then you picked it up as an adult and you're like, what? In this case, I read these in high school and I loved them, and then I read them again as adults. I asked for them for Christmas and they let me down a little bit. And that is Halo by Alexandra Adornetto. I loved this book so much in high school. I would draw like my versions of this scroll work around the title. I thought it was such an interesting concept. I loved the sort of grunge of the rock and roll music that happens in this book with the angels. This book follows the story of three angels, Bethany, Gabriel, and Ivy. Gabriel is the warrior, Ivy is the healer, and Bethany, the youngest, and she's the most human. They don't really have sort of a set power for Bethany. She's still pretty young, hasn't really been given too many gifts, but they are angels, and they come to Earth to sort of monitor this dark, evil stuff that is happening. And then, of course, Bethany, because she's the youngest and the most human, meets a boy named Xavier Woods and falls in love. And then it's about the battle for Xavier's soul and fighting against the darkness in the world. This is a first of three. It's a trilogy. The second is Hades, and the third one is Heaven, I believe. I really liked Hades. Hades was good, but I read this in high school and I was obsessed with it. It was so good, and it was years before I picked it up again. I think it was probably after college, and I read it and I was like, this wasn't as good as I remember it being. It was just sort of average, I guess. It was a typical YA fantasy, but it didn't really make a huge impact on me. But really, I'm keeping this in the trilogy for sentimentality. And I think when I read it in high school, Heaven wasn't out yet, the third one. And I think the second two were okay. The story overall is really good. It would be really interesting to see, if I was going to reimagine this, if we could combine all three into one book and make it a standalone, because I think you could boil it down, make it more concentrated, and combine all three together to make one big epic fantasy. And I think from there, maybe you could start another series. I don't mean to criticize her work. She was a teenager when she wrote this, 17, 18, when Alexandra wrote this, and it's a national bestseller, so I mean, she did great. I remember in high school being so impressed that someone my age had written and published this, and she herself was a big inspiration for why I wanted to start writing, because, I mean, she did great for her first novel out. I've been curious to know if she's written anything else. Yeah, I don't know. So, but both of those fit, I thought, the mashed potato prompt of thought they were gonna be good, they let me down a little bit. Okay, next we have cranberries, and the prompt that goes with this, with cranberries is, what is the sweetest romance you have ever read? Which is so hard, because I have so many books that could fit this, but I just have so many books where love is such a big element in them, and so I struggled to find one where that was sort of one of the main plot points, where it wasn't just sort of a subliminal thing that happened as a part of the story. And so I turned to a genre that not many people, I feel like, on BookTube talk about, and that is Christian romance fiction. And I have this series by Karen Whitmire, I can't exactly remember how to pronounce her name, but it just follows the story of 4 or 5 girls who are sort of in impossible situations and the love that comes out of them. This, I think, is probably my favorite. It's called Head in the Clouds, and it follows a story of a girl named Adelaide Proctor who was involved with a man and finds out that he was a traveling salesman who had an actual family and would just flirt with women wherever he went. And so she had followed him to this city, uprooted her life, followed him, and finds this out and is heartbroken and doesn't know what to do. And then she finds an advertisement to become a governess for the daughter of a sheep farmer. And she's basically just throws her hands up and is like, all right, God, if this is what you want me to do, I'll go. And she does, and it ends up being the best decision she ever makes. Gideon Westcott is the name of the sheep farmer. He is an English aristocrat who wasn't disowned by his family, but decided that he didn't want to be a part of the aristocracy anymore, and so he moved to the US and basically taught himself everything he knows about being a sheep farmer. And there's some drama because Adelaide, when she gets there, she's very inexperienced. She was a governess for a while, was a teacher for a while, but doesn't have the years that other candidates have. But she fell in love with Isabella or Izzy, who is the little girl, and that's why Gideon picked her. But there's some drama because Adelaide doesn't know whether Izzy is Gideon's daughter, what the whole situation is surrounding this. But basically, Gideon, when he was traveling from England to America, met this woman who had a young daughter, and the mother was very sick and was dying. And so she asked Gideon to basically take care of Isabella and not adopt her, but become her guardian, because there were family members in her family that were trying to poison people to steal Isabella's inheritance. And of course, one inevitably follows them to the frontier of America, and there's some drama surrounding that. Adelaide and Gideon fall in love. There is a trigger warning in here, I do want to say, for sexual assault, as well as some drug abuse. So I just want to make everyone aware that even Christian romance fiction isn't exempt from the vices of the world. But I love this story because I love Adelaide as a person. She just loves books and she loves writing, and she's so good with children. It's so good. There are 4 others in this series. They're really good, but this one I think is probably my favorite. It's the one I've read the most. It's so cute. Such a good romance. The ending, there's a huge twist at the end. It's so good. So if you ever get into this, or if you're looking for good Christian romance, I would start with Karen Whitemeyer. It's really good. So the next question has to do with corn. What is the corniest book that you have read? And I don't really think that many of the books I have are corny, so I went more with the ridiculousness, where it's just like an almost you eye roll at how fantastical the book is. And I couldn't pick any other than The Mysterious Benedict Society by Trenton Lee Stewart. If you've never read this book, it is a middle grade, at least I would classify it as a middle grade. It follows the story of Rainey Muldoon, who is an orphan, and basically he comes across this advertisement in the newspaper for gifted children. He said, if you are a gifted child, if you have an above average IQ, please come to this testing site and see if you will be a part of this secret society, which ends up being the Mysterious Benedict Society. And so he joins this incredibly odd cast of characters. These kids are so strange, and the things that happen to them and the sort of hidden purpose behind the Mysterious Benedict Society, the house that they live in, it's just, I wouldn't expect anything less of a fantasy middle grade, and just the pure ridiculousness that happens in this book. There's a big twist at the end. There is an evil they all have to fight and work together as a team to conquer. It does get a little bit meta at the end, which I think would push middle grade readers out of their comfort zones, but I don't know. It's so good. Like, and then the illustrations in here at the beginning of each chapter, like, beware the Gemini, ain't that the truth? Yeah, it's so good. And it's very, I would even say borderline, this is like dark academia for middle grade. Or like the juxtaposition of light academia and dark academia for middle grade readers. It's so cute, and there is Morse code, and there's like little activities and puzzles that kids can complete throughout the book. It's so cute. There are more than one, I think, in this series. This book is heavily abused. When I picked it up, I rescued it from an arts and crafts project. It was about to be turned into a book Christmas tree, and as soon as I saw the cover, I was like, I need this in my life, and I'm so glad I read it. It's so bonkers. I almost picked a Terry Pratchett book called The Carpet People to fill this prompt, but yeah, there are so many that could have filled the sort of farcical ridiculousness, but this one I think is my number one. And I don't really talk about too many middle grades on this channel because it's not really my genre, but this one I think is supreme. Question number 8 on this tag has to do with green beans, and the prompt that is around it is, what book needs to be shortened that is too long? Love those kitchen cut style green beans instead of the big long squeaky ones that you pluck from your garden. Anyway, like I said, I don't really have too many books on my shelves that I don't really enjoy. I get rid of them pretty quickly. However, I have several classics that I have kept over the years from my years in college, and I read Count of Monte Cristo over the summer into fall, and that one was already shortened from its 1,100 pages to 600 something, and it was still really long. But I think the book where I would like to read a shortened version of, or maybe a dramatization of, is John Milton's Paradise Lost. I read this for my early British literature class in college, kicked my butt. Look at all of these. I annotated it so heavily. It's how this story came about. Hang on just a second before I even get into that. This is all the introduction and all of the copious notes that go into it. Oh, I'm getting a headache just thinking about it. It's a beautiful story and it's so interesting to read. However, there is so much in here, and it's not that I don't enjoy reading stuff like this, it's just that this is 2 Kilimanjaros in one book. It's so much. And I would really love to read a translation of or a dramatization of this story, just to sort of, forgot I dog-eared that, just to sort of refresh my memory on what happens, because this is too much, I think, for the average reader. But it's such a great story that I think people would really, especially if you're one who really likes reading things that are based on biblical influence. So this follows the story of Lucifer as he falls to hell, and all about his mourning the loss of paradise, being kicked out of heaven, and then all of the things he brings about on earth to sort of get back at God. That's a very, very simplified explanation of what happens in here. I think probably the most fascinating part of this book is Milton himself, and he wrote Paradise Lost when he was near the end of his life, and he had 2 daughters, I think, who he basically forced to stay at home with him because he would dream up this epic poem at night. He would dream it and imagine it, and then in the morning he would cry down to his daughters to come milk him, which is such a gross phrase, to milk him for all of the things he had imagined at night, and they wrote it down. And Milton, for a long time, was the only person who had read everything ever written, which I think is also, you can't do that anymore. Having a skill like that, you know, it's in the age of the world where most people were illiterate, to be able to have read that much and still create something as fantastical and epic as this, I think is a huge accomplishment that not many people are aware of. So if you want to know more about him, you can pick up this edition. However, I really want to see, and maybe I just have to look harder for maybe fictionalized or dramatized version of this for the early reader, because it's such a great story, but this is intimidating. Okay, number 9 is, of course, pumpkin pie. We finished dinner, we've come to dessert, pumpkin pie, and that is what book gets you out of your reading slump. Because pumpkin pie is just food for the soul. It improves your life so much. Even if you don't like pumpkin pie, insert your favorite dessert. Apple pie, cake, ice cream. It's just the thing that just makes you feel like, you know, you're being wrapped in a warm, cinnamony, nutmeggy, gingery, clovey hug. It's my favorite thing. Love pumpkin pie, especially with coffee. And the book that gets me out of a reading slump is, again, one of my heart's true loves, is The Ranger's Apprentice by John Flanagan. Ugh. I mean, this man is so epic that he literally just says international best-selling author because he's Australian, but it's just, it's so good. And I mean, it's been translated, I don't even know how many times. This is the first book in the series, and I need to calm down because I get too excited about this series. This is, I would probably say YA. I don't think I would go, well, it does say ages 10 and up on the back, so middle grade to YA. I found this late middle school, early high school. This and Tiger's Curse opened my eyes to the world of YA, and it's what caused my obsession. And this series, I think there are 12 in the Ranger's Apprentice series. He has 2 others, the Brother Band Chronicles, which I have several of in my TBR. I'm way behind on that one. And he now has a 3rd, which is the Royal Ranger, which has to do with the princess who becomes a ranger. So it's the first female ranger on top of that. There are 2 that I have to read. And he has countless side stories and sort of backstories that fill in the information. And one of the reasons I love John Flanagan so much is because he listens to his readers, and he wrote, he had an order for his books, but there were so many people who were crying for a particular story that he changed the order of this series and wrote another story in the middle of his progression because the readers just wanted to know that bad, and they said, okay, I'll do it. And I was just like, oh. And then the other reason why I love it is because he wrote Ranger's Apprentice for his son, who didn't really enjoy reading, and so he wrote this story to inspire his son to start reading, and it's just so good. And then of course, you know, one of the biggest universes out there came to be, and it's so, I have no words. This follows the story of Will, and Will at 15 years old with his friends are now being assigned to a career track where you learn a trade skill. Will, in the kingdom of Erin, lives in Redmont, Fife, and while he is there, there is sort of a weird shadowy man whose name is Halt, and Halt is a ranger, and the rangers are sort of these shadowy figures that operate as the king's personal police force. And so while Will is obsessed with the idea of going to battle school, even though he's scrawny, and even though he's made fun of because he doesn't really have any defining skills, he is an excellent sort of sneaker, and he loves spying on people, and he's really good at hiding, and basically Will is so obsessed with the idea of going to battle school to live up to his family's reputation that he doesn't even sort of comprehend the fact that he is now chosen to be a ranger, and he becomes a ranger's apprentice. And it's the story of him discovering this set of talents that he has and understanding what the rangers do. There is an evil that they have to defeat. That is a very simplified gist of this first book. Lord Morgarath is the name of the evil in the story, and who used to be part of the king's army and separated, and yeah, he's like the Lucifer of Erin, which is the kingdom where they live. This first book and the second book, I think in my mind he wrote them as one book and then split them in half, because the story picks up so quickly in the second book. It literally, in the next breath, is where the second book starts. And then same thing with the third. I just have so many character attachments to this story. I love Will. Will is so great, and Halt is incredible. He's so sassy, so dour and dark, and yet he is such a father figure. And I love all of the other kids who are in this book, and all of the other rangers, people we meet. It's just, I was sucked in immediately within the first 3 chapters to this universe, and I can't get enough of it. And then, of course, the ruins of Gorlin, which is where sort of the battle scene takes place, is such a creepy, haunting place. It gave me goosebumps when I was reading about it. And it's just such a story of becoming your own hero and understanding that even though the world may tell you that you're one thing, that doesn't mean you are, and you can accomplish whatever you want. And even if the thing you want to accomplish isn't what you're good at, there is something out there that you are good at, and the world sorely needs that. And I think that's a message everyone needs to hear today. So I can't talk enough about Ranger's Apprentice. It's so good. And his other 2 series are exceptional. I would start with this one because this better establishes the universe, and the other 2, while they do an amazing job of explaining to you where everything is at, it helps to know where all of this came from. So I hope all of you have at least heard of this. If not, then find it at your local library. You can probably find these for pretty cheap at most bookstores. They've been out for a while, but get your hands on Ranger's Apprentice. It's so good. And the final prompt for this Thanksgiving book tag has nothing to do with books at all. It's just a foodie question, but it's supposed to be about the family pet. So what food would you steal from the table? Mine would 100% be mashed potatoes. I don't know why they got such a bad rep in this tag. I love mashed potatoes. My favorite thing is to put like the ranch powder in mashed potatoes. Oh, it's so good. And I love garlic mashed potatoes, and I love homemade mashed potatoes that are still lumpy. I love mashed potatoes with the skins on. I could just go on forever and ever and ever. Potatoes are so good. That would be the food that I would steal from the table. Pie probably being a very close second. All right, everybody, that's the end of the Thanksgiving book tag. If you have read these books, let me know what you thought. Put your reviews in the comments. If you have another book suggestion by any of these authors, please let me know. Like I said at the beginning of this video, the creator of this tag and then the site where I found it will also be linked down below for you to go explore. All the lists of the books and authors will be down below as well. If you would, please like this video and subscribe to Lee's Library. It really does help me out and let me know what you guys want to see. And as always, thank you to the friends and family who have readily supported me along the way. I can't wait to see what's on the next page. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.